Hey guys, tonight we step into a place where time itself seems to blur. A small Edwardian village square that still thrums with the heartbeat of the Middle Ages. Lanterns sway on crooked posts, spilling honeyed light across mud-slick cobbles. Somewhere in the distance, a drum thuds, slow, steady, like someone knocking on the ribs of history to see if it's still awake. You smell the damp wood smoke, the tang of cider, the faint sour note of livestock. The air feels alive, and you can almost hear it whispering, "Remember me." So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the heart of the square, boots sinking slightly into packed earth still damp from last night's rain. The lanterns overhead are more than just decoration. They're relics of a time when the fair wasn't simply amusement, but survival. In the medieval world that birthed these Edwardian echoes, a feast or fair was your year's social oxygen. Without it, villages would wither into silence. Here, even centuries later, the laughter still carries that same desperate joy, the kind you get when you know tomorrow might be back to toil and taxes. A fiddler tunes his instrument, and the thin, reedy melody cuts through the chatter. His hands are rough, not the delicate fingers of a trained musician, but the calloused tools of a plowman. He plays like someone stealing time, because he is. During these brief nights of celebration, even the poorest souls could pretend to be kings. Historians still argue whether Edwardian fairs were mere nostalgic pageants or genuine cultural continuations of medieval festivity. But as you watch a child chase a rolling hoop past a flickering lantern, you can't help but feel the latter is true. This isn't a performance, it's a living echo. The smell of roasting chestnuts competes with something sharper, pitch and oil. A few men are repairing a broken wheel by the firelight, hammering iron rims into place. Every clang jolts through the square like punctuation in a half-forgotten story. You edge closer, your breath misting in the cool night, and catch fragments of gossip, rumors of a baron's tax collector coming tomorrow, a broken engagement, a new ale brewed with too much honey. One man swears it'll make you see angels. Another laughs and says he saw them already, and they owed him money. It's funny how laughter, in any century, sounds the same. It's the one human currency that never needed minting. In one corner, a group of women string garlands from ivy and ribbon. The colors pop vividly against the soot-streaked walls, crimson, gold, and green, the same palette you'd find in a medieval manuscript. The tradition, they say, goes back to pagan times when every wreath was a charm against misfortune. The church frowned, of course, but tolerated it under the banner of local custom. Translation: as long as you tithe, we won't ask too many questions. You feel a tug at your sleeve. A boy no older than 10, his face smeared with soot and sugar. He's selling paper lanterns painted with crude zodiac signs. You buy one for a penny. When you light it, the parchment glows like skin held up to sunlight, revealing faint brushstrokes, tiny, careful, human. He beams, pockets your coin, and sprints off into the crowd. For a moment, his small flame is one of hundreds, bobbing like fireflies across the square. It's easy to romanticize all this, the laughter, the dancing, the firelight. But there's a shadow here too. These fairs were as much about survival as celebration. Medieval peasants needed the fair not only for joy but for trade. Edwardian villagers kept the custom alive out of memory, maybe even longing, for a time when community still meant something tangible. You suspect that's what draws people back every year, not the beer or the music, but the quiet reassurance that someone else is still here beside you. A gust of wind makes your lantern flicker. For a heartbeat, you see the square as it once was. No polished boots or newsboy caps, just bare feet, wooden stalls, and torches jammed into the ground. The past isn't gone, it's only sleeping. And nights like this, you can almost wake it. Somewhere, a drunk shouts a toast to Saint Monday. the patron of workers who mysteriously forgot to show up after Sunday feasts. Everyone roars with laughter. It's a joke older than sin itself and just as stubborn. You lean back against a post, the wood rough against your palm, and watch the swirl of people, old and young, gentry and commoner, laughing beneath the same unsteady lights. The air hums with possibility, a thin thread connecting centuries through dance and drink and shared fatigue. And as the church bell tolls 9, you realize the fair is only beginning. The night will stretch, fold, and bloom with stories of alewives and mummers, of games and masks, of bargains made under torchlight. And somehow, by morning, it'll all feel like a dream. But for now, you're still here, in the warmth of laughter, the smell of smoke, and the glow of lanterns that have outlasted kings. The morning smells like wet hay and ambition. You wake to the creak of wagon wheels and the shuffle of boots over damp cobbles. The market is stirring, stretching, coming alive again. It's the kind of dawn that feels less like a beginning and more like a continuation, as if the night's laughter simply rolled over into daylight without asking permission. The square that shimmered in lantern light only hours ago now brims with chaos. Chickens dart under carts, merchants argue over inches of stall space, and a donkey stubbornly refuses to move, despite being promised what sounds like divine forgiveness and a carrot. You rub your eyes and watch it all unfold. The transformation from revelry to trade, from midnight mystery to daylight commerce. Everywhere you turn, there's motion. A baker slaps dough with the authority of a small deity. A fishmonger dumps ice over a crate of river trout, muttering about yesterday's stench of sin. The smells of yeast, smoke, and manure weave together into something you'll call authentically medieval, a fragrance nobody has ever successfully bottled. The fair's heart lies in its market. Long before Edwardian nostalgia turned it into a quaint tradition, the medieval market was the village's bloodstream. Without it, trade would wither and gossip, equally important, would stagnate. Here, in this Edwardian echo of that world, the same patterns repeat themselves. Haggling, laughter, the exchange of goods and small mercies. You pass a cloth merchant draping bolts of dyed wool over his stall. The colors are astonishing: carmine, indigo, saffron, pigments so rich you can almost feel their history. He boasts that his dyes come from Florence, though his accent screams Gloucestershire. Historians still argue whether such claims were marketing bluster or genuine global trade reaching even small English fairs. You suspect a bit of both, and honestly, who could resist bragging about imported dye when your customers still think color itself is witchcraft? Further down, a cheese seller wields a wheel of cheddar like a weapon. Strong enough to wake the dead, he declares, and you almost believe him. Nearby, a woman sells ribbons and trinkets, her wares spread across a faded tapestry depicting knights and dragons. It's probably older than she is. And then there's the sound, the living pulse of commerce. Bells jingle on horses, coins clink like applause, and every voice competes for attention. Apples, fresh apples. Fine combs for finer hair. Hot pies mind the drippings. You catch a phrase in Norman French, another in Welsh, and realize that even centuries later, this chaos of tongues hasn't disappeared. Edwardian England liked to think of itself as modern, but the market spoke an older, earthier language. You stop by a spice stall, drawn by the sweet, heady scent of cinnamon and cloves. The merchant, a wiry man with an accent that wanders across continents, leans forward conspiratorially. "Straight from the east," he whispers, "through ports the crown dare not name." You nod, pretending to understand. He grins, revealing a single gold tooth. "You don't believe me," he says. You shrug. He laughs. "Good. Smart customers live longer." It's easy to forget that fairs were once semi-legal zones, places where authority looked the other way as long as taxes got paid. A sheriff might stroll through for show, but unless blood was spilled or a noble insulted, most disputes settled themselves. That's how peasants liked it: rough justice in rough times. A flash of movement draws your attention. A juggler in a red jerkin tossing apples, then knives, then flaming torches with unsettling confidence. The crowd gasps, coins clatter into his hat, and he bows with theatrical humility. "Just an honest day's work," he says, wiping soot from his sleeve. His assistant, a boy with more freckles than sense, grins and holds out the hat. "Don't be shy," he calls. "My master's wife eats only if you're generous," someone yells. "So she's starving then." And the laughter rolls like a tide. You wander on, deeper into the square. The stalls grow stranger the further you go. One sells miracle ointments made from goose fat and rosewater, supposedly able to cure gout, melancholy, and unwanted relatives. Another offers carved wooden charms shaped like saints or serpents. The distinction seems blurry. And then there's the scribe, his small table cluttered with parchment scraps, inkwells, and a single candle guttering in the daylight. For a few pennies, he'll write your love letter, legal claim, or confession, though he admits he charges extra for secrets. You pause beside him. "Would you like to send a message?" he asks without looking up. You tell him no, you're just passing through. He nods. "Everyone says that," he murmurs, "but nobody really passes through. They linger even when they leave." He's probably right. Not all merchants are here for trade, though. Some are scouts for gossip, chroniclers of sin. A pair of women stand by the well, whispering about who danced too close to whom last night. Their tone suggests both fascination and doom. You listen shamelessly. It's what the market's for, after all. Amid all this bustle, a small drama unfolds. A peddler argues with a customer over the price of a pewter brooch. The man swears it's silver. The buyer disagrees. After some theatrical shouting and a few choice insults about ancestry, they settle for half the asking price and a handshake. Justice served, market style. By mid-morning, the square glows golden. Sunlight slants through the haze of smoke and chatter. Musicians strike up again, half to entertain, half to drown out the haggling. You catch the tune, an old medieval melody. Sumer is Ikumen in, now played with Edwardian cheer and none of the original menace. You buy a small hand pie from a woman with a soot-smeared apron. It's filled with lamb and herbs, greasy and perfect. She winks. "Don't trust the ones with raisins," she warns. "They're hiding yesterday's meat." You make a mental note. The day hums on. Somewhere, someone's arguing theology beside a pig pen. A farmer boasts about a turnip the size of a baby. The blacksmith flirts shamelessly with anyone within hammer range. And you realize this isn't just commerce. It's theater. Every shout, every sale, every lie adds to the performance of survival. Medieval fairs might have faded, but in these Edwardian villages, they found a second life. A way to remember that humans, for all their pretensions, are happiest when bartering stories as much as goods. You take one last look around the square. Banners snapping in the breeze, smoke curling into a sky that's still holding its morning blue. Somewhere behind it all, you can almost hear the centuries applauding. By the time the market's roar softens into late afternoon hum, you're ready for shade, food, and something dangerously close to a nap. The scent of yeast and singed sugar lures you toward an inn that looks like it's been standing since the Black Death. Leaning slightly to one side, its roof patched with mismatched tiles, the signboard squeaking in the wind. The painted image is half faded, but you can just make out a tankard crowned by hops, the merry pheasant. If that isn't a promise of trouble, nothing is. Inside, the air is thick and sweet, beer, wood smoke, wet wool, and humanity. The kind of scent that clings to your soul for days. The hearth crackles, the floor creaks, and somewhere in the corner, a cat glares like it owns the mortgage. You take a seat at a scarred oak table and glance toward the woman behind the bar. She's wiping a pewter mug with the brisk efficiency of someone who's been overworked since birth. That's your first glimpse of her, the alewife. Her sleeves rolled up, her hands stained a faint amber from barley and hops. Her name, someone whispers, is Mistress Rome. You quickly realize she's not just a tavern keeper. She's the unofficial mayor, confessor, and local deity all rolled into one. She catches your look. "You drinking or starring?" she says without looking up. You order the house brew, she snorts. "You'll live, probably." The mug hits the table with a satisfying thud. The ale inside is cloudy, warm, and alive in ways modern drinks are. The first sip tastes like bread, honey, and a faint metallic tang, perhaps from the copper vats in the back, or perhaps because Mistress Roan adds something extra. Historians still argue whether medieval-style brewing in Edwardian villages kept any real connection to monastic traditions or if it was just clever marketing. But watching her stir a vat in the flickering firelight, you'd swear you're witnessing alchemy. The rhythm of her ladle, the muttered counting under her breath, it's ritual, not recipe. She catches your fascination. You think it's just barley and yeast, don't you? She says. There's always one more thing. You ask what that is. She smiles, slow and secretive. I could tell you, she says, but then you'd be competition. The inn is full of noise, laughter, dice rattling in mugs, a minstrel half-heartedly plucking a lute missing one string. A trio of farmhands argue about who won the wrestling match last fair day. An old man snores into his stew. You sip your ale and listen as Mistress Roan tells a story to anyone willing to hear. Once, she says, a brewer in Devon tried to make beer from river water on Saint Swithin's Day. Said the saint would bless the batch if it rained. It didn't. The brew turned black as pitch, bubbled for weeks, and finally exploded. Took half the thatch with it. The priest called it divine punishment. I call it bad timing. Everyone laughs, even the priest sitting near the window. In truth, brewing had long been women's work before industrialization muscled in. Alewives held a peculiar power. They fed men's thirst, gossip's hunger, and sometimes even rebellion's spark. Many were fined for overcharging or watering down their ale, but others became minor legends, half witch, half entrepreneur. There's an old superstition that a true alewife keeps a toad near her barrels, believing it senses spoilage before any human nose could. You glance toward the hearth and spot a small, lumpy shadow hopping lazily between firewood pieces. Mistress Roan follows your gaze. Don't judge, she says. He pays rent in flies. She pours another round and tells you something stranger, that during harvest season she brews a special batch infused with mugwort and honey, a charm against fever, or so her grandmother claimed. It never worked, she says, but people kept buying it. That's what matters. A minstrel nearby picks up the mood and starts a soft tune, his voice rough as gravel but steady. The lyrics are half nonsense, half prophecy. Drink, my love, before the fair turns dark, for ale remembers what the heart forgets. The crowd hums along, tankards thumping the table in rhythm. You're swept into it, warmth blooming behind your ribs. Someone beside you mutters that the ale tastes better this year. Mistress Roan raises a brow. That's because the taxman hasn't found it yet. Everyone laughs again, a little too loudly. You notice a parchment nailed to the wall near the bar, a faded decree forbidding the sale of unlicensed spirits, gambling within the parish bounds, and unseemly conduct by alewives. It's dated 1732, but no one seems to care. Maybe no one ever did. In one corner, a young couple whispers behind their mugs. You catch fragments, something about eloping after the fair, something about leaving before her father finds out. It's the kind of small drama that's probably been happening in this very room for centuries. You wonder how many lives have started or ended over a half-finished pint. You finish your drink and realize that the alewife's smile is the real secret ingredient here. It's confidence, defiance, and just enough danger to make life taste sharper. As you rise to leave, she calls after you. Don't forget, she says, the best ales are the ones that make you dream strange. Outside, the sun has dropped low. The square glows gold and copper, smoke rising from stalls like incense. You breathe it in and feel a little tipsy on history itself. The fair is shifting gears again. The performers are gathering, the musicians tuning, and the laughter is about to find a new rhythm. But behind you, the indoor swings shut with a heavy wooden sigh, and for a moment, you think you smell barley, honey, and something else, something like magic. Outside the inn, the world feels freshly rearranged. The square is no longer just a market, it's a stage. Stalls that once sold bread now serve as platforms, barrels become drums, and ropes strung between carts mark the boundary between performance and audience. You wander closer, drawn by the sharp trill of a flute and the uneven beat of a tambourine. A hush ripples through the crowd, anticipation thick as smoke before thunder. Then, with a flourish of bells and laughter, the mummers arrive. They come in patchwork tunics of crimson and green, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks, painted wood, animal hide, or sometimes just soot and imagination. Their leader, a tall man with a painted sunburst across his brow, shouts, "Make way for fools and prophets, and sometimes both." The crowd roars. You can't help but grin. There's something primal about them, something older than the fair itself. These mummers are descendants of the medieval minstrels, half entertainers, half truth-tellers, licensed to mock kings and priests so long as everyone pretends it's just a joke. Even now, in Edwardian England, they walk that tightrope between laughter and blasphemy. The first skit begins. A mock knight with a bucket for a helmet staggers into view, declaring his undying love for the Queen of Pies. She's played by a burly man in a wig that looks like it lost a fight with a chicken. The crowd howls. The dialogue is all rhymes and riddles, laced with innuendo sharp enough to make the local curate cough into his sleeve. Historians still argue whether mumming plays were subversive theater or just bawdy fun, you think, watching the knight fake swoon into a haystack. The answer, as usual, is probably both. These plays were the villagers' chance to laugh at their rulers, their taxes, and sometimes even themselves. Behind you, an old woman mutters, "Same jokes every year." Then she laughs anyway. A jester takes the stage next, painted cheeks, jingling cap, eyes bright with mischief. He balances a stick on his chin, then tosses it skyward, catching it with a theatrical gasp. "See how I defy gravity," he cries. "Now if only I could defy rent." The crowd bursts into laughter that feels a little too real. You edge closer and notice that some of the masks have symbols drawn on them, crosses, suns, spirals. Superstition lingers here like the smell of ale. The masks, people say, protect the wearers from spirits who dislike seeing their own reflection. You can't decide whether that's charming or terrifying. Probably both. The minstrel troupe joins in, their instruments gleaming in the light of a setting sun. A lute, a tabor drum, a rebec, all plucked from another century. One begins a tune so haunting you feel your bones hum along. The melody shifts from joy to sorrow to something in between, like a memory trying to decide how it wants to be remembered. You lean against a cart, soaking it in. The mummers' jokes twist between satire and storytelling. A mock trial is held, convicting a local farmer of stealing moonlight from the Queen's own pond. His sentence: to dance until the audience forgives him. He's a terrible dancer. They forgive him immediately. A group of children weaves through the crowd with ribbons, mimicking the adults on stage. One boy ties a scrap of cloth around his head and announces himself as King of Beggars. He trips on his own robe and crashes into a pie stall. Applause everywhere. The baker groans. "That's coming out of your future," she mutters, but you see her smile. In the midst of it all, a quieter act begins. A storyteller with a face like weathered parchment. No props, no mask, just voice. He speaks of St. George and the dragon, though this version ends differently. The dragon, tired of all the slaying, strikes a deal. The saint must attend the village fair each year and buy a round for everyone as penance. The crowd cheers the dragon's wisdom. The performer's words blur into the crackle of torches and the rhythm of hands clapping on knees. You realize the show isn't meant to impress. It's meant to connect, to remind every soul here that laughter is a kind of resistance. You spot Mistress Roan from the inn, leaning in a doorway, watching with arms crossed and that same knowing half-smile. She catches your eye, raises an invisible mug in salute, then disappears into the crowd. As the final act begins, the troupe performs the Dance of Fools, a swirling chaos of color and sound. They spin and collide, shrieking with joy, while the fiddler saws his bow like he's trying to set the air on fire. The tempo quickens until even the audience begins to sway. You're moving too, without meaning to, caught in the shared heartbeat of 100 people laughing in unison. And then, as suddenly as it began, it's over. The mummers bow, the crowd cheers, coins rain into upturned hats. The leader doffs his mask, revealing sweat, exhaustion, and a grin wide as the moon. "Remember us kindly," he calls, "for we'll remember your laughter when the taxman comes." The crowd disperses, chattering, glowing. The stage dissolves back into the marketplace, as if the performance was just another trade. You glance around, at the faces flushed with mirth, the torches sputtering, the dusk settling like a warm blanket, and you realize that something very old just happened here. You may be in the Edwardian age, but beneath the bunting and brass buttons, this is still the Middle Ages whispering through the cracks. Still the same hunger for story, for satire, for laughter at authority. And as the last jester disappears behind the inn, bells jingling faintly, you hear someone in the crowd murmur, "Bless the fools, they tell the truest tales." The smell hits you first, fat sizzling, bread baking, something sweet and faintly burnt. By twilight, the fair's heart beats around its tables, and you, lucky wanderer, have found yourself at the center of a medieval feast reborn in Edwardian memory. Torches flicker along long trestle boards lined with trenchers of bread, each one groaning under the weight of food that looks both delicious and slightly suspicious. A herald shouts above the chatter, his voice cracking from overuse. "Let the feast begin," the crowd cheers. Platters arrive like ships on a tide, roasted boar with skin crisp to bronze, eels in jelly, pigeon pies steaming under latticed crusts. There's venison glazed in spiced wine, apples baked till their skins split, and a pudding so dense it could double as building material. You take a seat beside a cooper and his wife. They nod politely, then immediately resume arguing about whether salt pork was cheaper last year. The wife wins. You sense she usually does. The first bite of boar surprises you. It's smoky and tender, though a little chewy, as if it's fighting for historical accuracy. The ale you're handed washes it down beautifully. Its mistress Roan's brew again. You recognize the faint floral bitterness. Someone at the table calls it liquid courage. Another calls it truth serum. Probably both are right. Feasts like this were once acts of political theater. In medieval times, they weren't just about food. They were about hierarchy, generosity, and showing the village who held power. Even now, centuries later, that echo lingers. The local squire sits at the head table under a banner embroidered with a rampant stag, carving the first slices of roast as if he's knighted every pig personally. You glance down the line and notice the unspoken order of things. The gentry near the front, the tradesmen in the middle, the laborers near the ale barrels. No one complains, but the awareness hums beneath the laughter. Historians still argue whether Edwardian fairs like these represented nostalgia for unity or a safe performance of class difference. Either way, everyone eats, and everyone eats well. A boy weaves through the crowd carrying a basket of bread so hot it steams in the night air. He drops a loaf near your elbow with a grin missing 2 teeth. "That one's lucky," he says. "It fell on the right side up." You decide not to ask what happens if it doesn't. A man across from you raises his mug. "To St. Arnold, patron of brewers and mercies," he shouts. "May our cups never empty and our heads never remember." The toast catches on like wildfire. Mugs clash, foam spills, someone starts singing. You listen as stories unspool between bites, tales of haunted barns, prophetic dreams, and the year the fair pig escaped and won a foot race. One man swears he saw a monk's ghost once, wearing boots with no feet inside. The others laugh, but no one fully dismisses it. Belief and disbelief sit side by side here, like guests who have learned to share the same plate. The feast shifts tone as night deepens. The firelight turns faces amber, shadows stretch across the table, and somewhere a fiddle begins a slow, mournful tune. The laughter softens. Even merriment has its rhythm, A rise, a pause, a reflection. You think of how fragile this all is. A few barrels of ale, a few loaves, and the human agreement that for tonight, joy will be enough. Then comes the showpiece, a whole peacock roasted and redressed in its own feathers, beak gilded with gold leaf. The squire's servant carries it like a trophy. Gasps ripple through the crowd. It's absurd, magnificent, and deeply medieval. Historians say nobles once served these to impress ambassadors, someone whispers. Now it's just for the tourists. But there's awe in his voice, not mockery. The cooper beside you nudges your arm. You know, he says, they used to test the meat with a silver fork. If it blackened, it meant poison. You eye your plate nervously. He laughs. Don't worry, these days it just means the cook sneezed on it. For dessert, there's marchpane molded into tiny castles, and tarts filled with spiced plums. The air grows hazy with smoke, laughter, and the occasional burst of coughing from someone who misjudged the cinnamon-to-air ratio. You glance up at the night sky. Lanterns sway like slow stars. Somewhere beyond the hills, real stars burn with medieval indifference. You imagine peasants of old looking at those same constellations, Orion the hunter, Ursa Major the Pleiades, while gnawing the same kind of bread, laughing at the same kind of jokes. Humanity hasn't changed much, you realize. We've just gotten better at pretending we're new. At the end of the table, a priest blesses the leftovers for charity. Half the food will go to the poor by morning, an ancient custom, though cynics claim it's also to keep the fairgrounds cleaner. Good deeds, the priest murmurs, make lighter mornings. You privately suspect he means hangovers. Someone starts another round of toasts. To the mummers, cries one. To Mistress Roan, shouts another. To the Queen of Pies, bellows a third, earning applause and a throne crust from the baker herself. You laugh until your sides ache. By the time the fires burn low, bellies are full and tempers mellow. A child nods off on his mother's lap. A dog gnaws a forgotten bone. A fiddler, half asleep, plays one last tune that wanders through the smoke like a tired ghost. And you, lulled by ale and warmth, realize this is more than a feast. It's a collective dream, a centuries-old illusion that every village needs. That for one night life is plentiful, laughter is safe, and the world, however briefly, is whole. Morning hasn't yet broken, but already the clatter of wooden cups and the soft thump of dice on tabletops signal the start of the fair's next act, the games of chance and folly. You wake to a chorus of laughter, jeers, and the high-pitched squeal of a pig being enthusiastically chased by at least 4 men and 1 woman with a flower crown. The village green, which only hours ago held feasting tables, now transforms into an open-air arena of temptation, wit, and outright mischief. The alewife from last night, Mistress Roan, has traded her apron for a ribboned cap and stands beside a barrel marked wagers. She grins as coins clink into her palm. Luck, she tells you, is a form of faith and a little bit of theater. You realize she's not wrong. The first event draws a crowd, the toss of the bones. At a makeshift table, 2 men roll dice carved from sheep knuckles. A judge watches solemnly, pretending that superstition has no place in the outcome. Around you, the bets are loud and reckless. One sailor swears he'll stake his boots. Another claims he'll shave his beard if he loses. You notice a coin disappear from the table faster than a blink, and the crowd doesn't seem to care. In this space, cheating is half the sport. Then comes the barrel race. Pairs of men and women roll enormous casks uphill, slipping in the mud, shouting encouragement and curses in equal measure. The crowd roars when one barrel veers off course and knocks into the bread stall, scattering loaves like startled pigeons. Best game of the day, laughs an old woman beside you, waving a stick of toffee. It's the only one that guarantees a bath. Nearby, musicians strike up a jaunty tune for the pig chase. A fat pink pig, greased with butter and adorned with a ribbon, bolts through the grass, pursued by a shrieking mob of contestants. The rule is simple: catch it and you keep it. The rule unspoken: don't expect it to be easy. You watch, half horrified, half delighted, as the pig darts under skirts and between legs, leaving chaos and laughter in its wake. By noon, archery competitions begin. The prizes are humble, coin, ale, or a kiss from the fair queen. But the pride is immense. One man hits the target dead center and bows as though he saved England itself. Another looses his arrow straight into a cider barrel and is cheered even louder. In the fair's logic, both are heroes. Next, the shell game. A man in a patched red coat lifts and drops walnut shells in dizzying rhythm, his voice oiled with charm. Find the pea, win a penny, 3 guesses for a farthing. You're tempted, but the glint in his eye tells you everything you need to know. No one wins unless he wants them to. Still, a small crowd gathers, hypnotized by hope and sleight of hand. Then there, the strongman's challenge. Villagers test their might lifting anvils, hauling ropes, or, if the stories are true, trying to outdrink the blacksmith. The blacksmith always wins. He's a mountain of a man, and his laughter rolls like thunder when challengers collapse mid-swig. Children swarm to their own games. Apple bobbing, hoop rolling, puppet shows where devils are beaten with sticks. Every shout, splash, and squeal seems designed to remind you that joy here isn't clean. It's sticky, muddy, alive. And everywhere there's gambling. Men bet on everything. How long the juggler can keep his torches in the air, which chicken will cross the finish line first, whether the minstrel's next rhyme will offend the priest. The stakes are small but serious. You overhear one woman whisper, "Luck's a fickle saint. Best pray to her before she preys on you." By mid-afternoon, the fair grows rowdy. The air smells of cider and hay, of victory and poor decisions. A group of sailors chant drinking songs, clanging mugs together in rhythm. Somewhere, a fight breaks out over a game of cards. The constable sighs, pulls them apart, and then quietly places a bet on the rematch. At the edge of the chaos stands a fortune-teller's tent, its entrance draped with violet cloth. A sign reads, "See what fortune forgets." You step closer and hear the whisper of coins, the clack of cards. Inside, a woman with eyes like candle flame greets you. "You want to win?" she asks softly. "Or just not to lose?" You hesitate, unsure which answer is truer. She smiles knowingly. That's how it starts for everyone. Outside, the laughter rolls on. The games, you realize, are more than entertainment, they're ritual. A controlled way for villagers to test fate, to flirt with chaos without being destroyed by it. Medieval fairs blurred the line between devotion and indulgence, and Edwardian nostalgia only polished that chaos with a veneer of charm. Here, fortune isn't divine, it's democratic. Everyone gets a turn, even if the dice are rigged. As the sun begins to dip, Mistress Roan rings a bell announcing the final wager, the fool's forfeit. One unlucky or lucky participant must stand on a barrel and endure good-natured ridicule until they can make the crowd laugh harder than they're laughing at them. The rule: no anger, only wit. The punishment: a dunk in the horse trough. A young man volunteers, climbs atop the barrel, and bows dramatically. "Ladies, gents, and gentle frauds," he begins, "I've wagered my dignity and found it overvalued." The crowd howls. He keeps going, mocking the squire's hat, the brewer's temper, the priest's growing collection of lost silver spoons. By the end, even the priest is laughing. You laugh too, realizing that this roaring, raucous absurdity is the village's truest faith. That luck, laughter, and humiliation all belong to the same God, and tonight everyone is blessed. The bell tolls once more. The games are over. The crowd scatters toward the tavern tents, pockets lighter, spirits higher. You watch as the last die rolls into a puddle and sinks beneath the mud, its fate, like everyone's, left to chance. Twilight drifts down like a slow exhale. The fair, once drenched in sunlight and ale, begins to shimmer with a new kind of energy, masks and mischief. The village green transforms again, its daylight laughter replaced by something half-whispered, half-sinful. Torches are lit, flames bending in the chill breeze. Shadows stretch long and uncertain. Everywhere, people are donning disguises. Animal masks, veils, feathered hoods. even painted faces that catch the firelight like small, laughing ghosts. You blink and the villagers you thought you knew have vanished. In their place, foxes with tankards, maidens turned wolves, and a priest, possibly not your priest, wearing a crown of ivy and pretending not to be recognized. "Evening, stranger," says a voice beside you. You turn to find a woman in a half-mask shaped like a hare, her smile playful, her eyes unguessable. Or have we met before? You have no idea, but that's the point. Tonight is the mask of reversal, a tradition with roots older than memory, when the world turns upside down and the rules slip like melted wax. Peasants become lords. Lords pretend to beg. Wives dance with men who might not be their husbands. It's a way to mock the powerful without getting burned for it, the hair woman explains, spinning lazily in her cloak. At least, that's what they tell the priests. Historians still argue whether these masquerades were rebellion or release. Were villagers laughing at their masters or laughing with them? No one agrees. But here, in this dusky moment, it doesn't matter. Every mask is freedom, every dance a brief forgetting. The band starts up, a wild, uneven tune played on fiddle and drum laced with laughter. Couples pair off, whirling in uneven circles. You're pulled into the crowd, the air hot with breath and cider. Someone, maybe the hair, places a mask over your face, carved from birch and smelling faintly of smoke. For a heartbeat, you forget who you are. You become whoever you want to be. The torch parade begins next. A line of masked villagers winds through the streets, torches high, singing verses that shift between Latin prayer and bawdy rhyme. The song rises and falls like a tide, the words lost but the intent, pure mischief, clear. At the center of it all, a towering figure appears, the Lord of Misrule. Cloaked in red, crowned with straw, he rides a cart pulled by laughing children. His scepter, a wooden spoon, his throne, a cider barrel. He shouts decrees like a drunken prophet. Let all quarrels be danced away. Let envy drink until it forgets its name. And let tomorrow regret everything tonight dares to do. The crowd roars approval. You can't help but laugh. You follow the procession to the churchyard, where the fair's boundaries blur with the sacred. The Lord of Misrule climbs atop a tomb and raises his torch high. Around him, masked dancers form a ring, chanting nonsense syllables that almost, but not quite, sound like a spell. Bless this night, he calls, when fools may rule and wisdom sleeps. There's something almost ancient here, older than Christianity, older than reason. For a flicker of a moment, you feel the line between celebration and ritual thin to nothing. The masks, the dancing, the chaos, it's not just fun. It's survival, a release valve for the pressures of class, piety, and poverty. The village knows this instinctively. One night of madness keeps the rest of the year sane. A man dressed as a bear dances clumsily with a woman dressed as a nun. Children toss petals and stolen apples. The air smells of wax, sweat, and joy. You lose sight of the hair woman, then glimpse her again across the firelight, blowing you a kiss before vanishing into the masked crowd. Laughter ripples through the dark as someone stumbles into the priest's cart. The priest, half serious, half amused, crosses himself and mutters, "Lord, forgive them, but not until morning." Then the music changes, slower, stranger. A single fiddler begins a tune that curls around the night like smoke. The dancers sway, the torches dim. For a heartbeat, silence takes hold. The Lord of Misrule lowers his torch, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "Every mask," he says softly, "hides the same truth, that we're all pretending, one way or another." And then he laughs, breaking the spell, and the crowd erupts again. The moment of unease vanishes into applause. Later, when you finally peel off your mask, your skin smells of ash and ale. Around you, villagers are laughing, embracing, collapsing in heaps of exhaustion. The fair feels both lighter and heavier, as though some shared secret has passed among you all. A final flare of torches rises, a fiery farewell to the night's illusions. As they burn low, you spot a mask lying in the mud, half hair, half human, its smile crooked but knowing. You almost reach down to take it, but stop yourself. Some disguises, you suspect, aren't meant to be worn twice. The fair hums quieter now. The masks hang from tree branches like strange fruits, swaying gently in the dark. You realize the mischief has served its purpose. Laughter as medicine, anonymity as courage. Tomorrow, the villagers will wake, wash their faces, and return to their real names. But for this one enchanted night, the world was gloriously upside down, and no one wanted it any other way. The first church bell tolls low and deliberate, cutting through the laughter like a distant conscience. The fair quiets, not completely, but enough that you can feel a collective breath, a momentary awareness of how close joy has come to sin. At the edge of the square, the church bell compromise begins. It's the unspoken pact that allows the fair to exist at all. The clergy will tolerate a bit of mischief, provided it fills the tithe box by Sunday. You drift toward the church, drawn by the curious sound of hymns mixing with the smell of roasted meat. The wooden doors are open, and inside a candlelight service is underway. The priest's voice echoes softly, steady, patient, perhaps a touch resigned. Outside, not 10 steps away, someone is selling gingerbread shaped like saints. It's almost comical, almost. The villagers treat it as natural law. Inside is salvation. Outside is temptation. Between the two, there's a gray area where most people prefer to live. "We call it keeping the peace," says a merchant beside you, balancing a tray of roasted chestnuts. Father Oswin calls it God's patience on credit. You laugh, but the phrase sticks with you. The priest, Father Oswin himself, steps outside after the sermon, squinting at the fairground through the smoke. He's a stocky man with an easy smile and a slightly harder stare. "The Lord's work is no enemy to a good laugh," he says when you greet him, "but he prefers we do our laughing with clean hands." You're not sure how clean anyone's hands are here, least of all his. Because just behind him, a line of villagers waits for the blessing of the barrels. A half-serious, half-profitable ritual where the priest sprinkles holy water over ale casks, then quietly accepts donations for the parish roof fund. You watch him dip his fingers, flick droplets, and murmur Latin over each barrel. The crowd crosses themselves, giggling. "Water into ale," mutters Mistress Roan, appearing beside you again, just not in the direction the book suggests. Still, everyone plays along. It's tradition, and in a village like this, tradition is as binding as scripture. A few paces away, a monk in threadbare robes is preaching about moderation while sipping cider. "Drink not to excess," he says, swallowing, "unless it's excellent." The crowd cheers him like a saint. Historians still argue whether the clergy of such fairs were truly corrupt or simply pragmatic. Some records describe bishops denouncing these revels as dens of iniquity. Others show them attending with surprising regularity, often to ensure proper conduct, a phrase suspiciously vague. Perhaps, like everyone else, they just wanted a good seat near the ale tent. You wander toward the back of the church, where another kind of commerce thrives. A woman sells pilgrim badges, little tin trinkets supposedly blessed at distant shrines. "Guaranteed holy," she assures you, though the ink on some still smells wet. Next to her, a man hawks candles made from the fat of saints, which you sincerely hope is just marketing. Inside, a choir sings faintly, trying to drown out the sound of laughter and lute music from the square. But even the hymns seem to sway to the fair's rhythm. You imagine angels, a little tipsy, humming along. The mingling of sacred and profane feels almost delicate, like a dance no one quite remembers the steps to. One moment, Father Oswin scolds a group of boys for tossing dice on the church steps. The next, he's smiling as they drop a few coins in the alms box. "Every sin," he says, "pays its own penance." Later, as dusk deepens, the priest gives a short sermon outside, his version of compromise in full view. "The Lord made laughter," he declares, voice rising above the hum of the crowd, "and laughter reminds us we're still alive. But remember, he also made silence. and you'll owe him some of that come morning." The villagers applaud politely, then immediately return to their merrymaking. Father Oswin sighs but doesn't stop them. You can't help but admire his flexibility. At the far edge of the green, a young curate tries to preach from a crate. "Turn from temptation," he cries. A juggler promptly tosses him an apple. The crowd laughs. The curate catches it, bites in, and looks both embarrassed and delighted. "See," says Mistress Roan with a wink, "we're saving his soul by feeding it." The line between holiness and hilarity blurs completely when the mummers' troupe arrives at the church gate, performing a parody miracle play. They reenact St. George slaying the dragon, but this dragon is suspiciously shaped like two drunken farmers in a green sheet. The audience roars as St. George forgets his lines and the dragon wins. Even Father Oswin smiles, though he quickly hides it behind his hand. You notice a few villagers kneeling to pray in the church porch afterward. They're laughing one minute, repenting the next, perhaps both equally sincere. It dawns on you that this strange partnership between faith and folly is what keeps the village balanced. Without the church, the fair would collapse into chaos. Without the fair, the church would drown in solemnity. Together, they make something profoundly human, flawed, funny, forgiving. As night falls, the bells ring again, softer this time, almost like a lullaby. The fair quiets for a heartbeat as everyone listens. Out of habit, respect, or superstition, you can't tell. The sound lingers, fatting over fields now silvered with moonlight. Father Oswin crosses himself and murmurs, "God keep the drunk, the poor, and the merry. He'll sort them out later." Then he turns to bless another barrel. The laughter resumes, a little gentler now, as though the village has remembered the boundaries but chosen, kindly, to ignore them for one more night. The moon climbs higher, a pale coin tossed into the velvet sky, and the fair, far from fading, finds a second wind. The music returns, rougher now, the rhythm more instinct than tune. Shadows shift and laughter deepens. It's the hour when class distinctions loosen, when the carnival of contradictions truly begins. The torches burn lower, and the lines between highborn and lowborn blur like watercolor in rain. You see a squire trying to outdrink a shepherd, a widow dancing with the miller's son, and somehow, a minor noble playing a lute badly but enthusiastically while peasants clap him on the back. You drift through the crowd, watching faces gleam in the torchlight. Everyone looks freer, as though the masks from earlier have melted into their expressions. Even the local magistrate is here, pretending not to notice his own servant winning a wager on the dice. Fairs are the one time the world forgets itself, Mistress Roan murmurs beside you, nursing a mug of cider. Tomorrow we'll all go back to knowing our place, but tonight we're all fools together. There's warmth in that idea, even a kind of tenderness. A small stage has been cleared near the ale tents, where minstrels trade verses in a sort of comic duel. One sings of knights and glory. Another answers with a bawdy tale about the knight's real adventures in the tavern. The crowd howls. A nobleman in a fine cloak tosses a coin, shouting, "Sing truer next time." Then comes the maypole dance, unseasonal but demanded by the crowd. Colored ribbons whirl in the firelight as peasants and gentry alike weave around the pole, tripping over one another. The laughter becomes a language of its own, joy with a hint of rebellion. Historians still argue whether these moments were tolerated escapes or quiet acts of defiance. Some claim the fairs were a way for the poor to mimic privilege, others that they mocked it outright. But to you, standing here in the press of bodies and the thrum of drums, it feels simpler. They just wanted to be human for a while, unmeasured, unjudged. You spot the Lord of Misrule again, still crowned in straw but now sharing his throne, a borrowed cider barrel with a woman in embroidered silk. They toast each other, laughing, utterly unconcerned with rank. You overhear a merchant whisper, "That's Lady Hatherley from the manor." The man beside him shrugs. "Tonight she's just another sinner." A group of soldiers arm wrestles farmhands nearby. The farmhands win more often than not. Each victory earns a cheer, each loss a refill. Somewhere behind them, a group of children imitates the adults, locking hands over a pile of apples. Their giggles mix with the deeper rumble of grown-up mirth. You turn toward the food stalls where the cook, sweating, laughing, swearing affectionately, hands out roasted fowl and sweet puddings to whoever's within reach. "Feed the rich and the poor alike," he bellows. "They'll both pay me tomorrow if they remember." The equality of indulgence feels almost revolutionary. A little further on, the guild tents have become centers of unexpected unity. The blacksmith shares ale with the tailor, the potter flirts with the apothecary, and a passing friar wins a round of cards by bluffing so well that even the devil would have taken notes. But the fair's contradictions run deeper than laughter. Beneath the revelry there are glances that linger too long, whispers half drowned by music. You notice two lovers slipping behind a wagon, one wearing silk, the other homespun wool. Their hands touch briefly before vanishing into shadow. A scandal if anyone cared to name it, but no one does. Tonight, secrets belong to the Firelight. You pause near a storyteller's corner where a woman, old and sharp-eyed, recounts the legend of the knight and the beggar's bride. In her tale, a nobleman falls for a peasant girl he meets at a fair, and when she refuses his advances, he disguises himself as a tradesman to win her heart. The crowd sighs at the happy ending. Only the storyteller's final line makes a few faces sober. But come morning, the beggar's bride was gone. And so was his disguise. A ripple passes through the crowd, soft, uncertain. It's as if everyone suddenly remembers that joy, like disguise, is temporary. Still, the music swells again, shaking off the moment. The fiddles quicken. A group of young men forms a circle, clapping in time as a barefoot woman spins through the center, skirts whirling like sparks. Someone tosses her a coin, someone else a flower. The dance grows faster, louder, until it feels like the whole fair is pulsing with one shared heartbeat. You can't help but join in, clapping, moving, feeling the strange electricity that binds a crowd when everyone forgets to be separate. When you finally step away, breathless, you notice the contrast anew. A monk and a miller sharing laughter, a squire sitting cross-legged with a beggar, trading stories about who's seen more of the world. It's absurd and beautiful all at once. Mistress Roan reappears, handing you a cup. "It's mulled wine," she says. "Don't ask what's in it. It's older than our ancestors." You take a sip, sweet, spiced, slightly dangerous, and feel the warmth spread through you. Around you, the fair hums with a rhythm that's half chaos, half communion. Then for just a moment, silence again. A hush rolls through the crowd as the church bell tolls midnight. The Lord of Misrule raises his cup and shouts, "To the fools who make the wise worth tolerating." The crowd echoes the toast, 1,000 voices strong. You lift your cup too, feeling part of something both ancient and immediate, an echo of medieval knights reborn in Edwardian hearts. Tomorrow the class lines will return. The noble will be noble again, the servant a servant. But tonight the air itself refuses to remember. And as you look around, at strangers laughing like old friends, at lovers unmasked, at priests pretending not to smile, you realize this contradiction isn't a flaw of the fair. It is the fair, the chaos that lets a village remember how to feel alive. Morning hovers somewhere far away, but the fair isn't finished yet, not by a long shot. When you think it's over, when the torches are burning low and the songs have turned to murmurs, something shifts again. Lanterns flare to life, candles wink on in the stalls, and from the far end of the green comes the sing-song cry of a peddler. Relics, charms, cures for curses, kisses, and colds. You turn toward the sound and find the relics row, the strangest and most fascinating corner of the fair. Here, trade isn't just for bread or ale, it's for the supernatural, the hopeful, the absurd. A crooked little lane of tents stretches into the dark, glowing like a crooked spine of miracles. You step closer and smell beeswax, incense, and something faintly metallic, like old coins and secrets. At the first stall, a bearded man in a patched cloak displays small bones on a velvet cloth. Saintly fragments, he says, lowering his voice, collected from the tombs of holy men and women. He gestures at one bone the size of a sparrow's toe. That there's St. Agnes's knuckle, guarantees fidelity, yours or theirs, depending on how you hold it. You ask how he came by it. He smiles, showing a gold tooth. By faith, he says solemnly, then he winks, and a quick hand. Historians still argue whether such relic sellers were frauds or folk therapists. Some were genuine collectors of devotional art, others enthusiastic inventors of it. In truth, it hardly mattered. The villagers believed or wanted to, and belief, as you're realizing, is the true currency here. A few stalls down, an old woman sells charms woven from straw. Protection from evil eye, from storm, from mother-in-law, she says, holding up one shaped like a twisted knot. You buy one mostly for the story. She grins and adds, keep it near the door and trouble will walk past, unless it's invited. Next to her, a young man in a flamboyant hat sells bottled moonlight, tiny jars filled with clear water and silver glitter. He swears it's captured under a full moon. A small crowd gathers as he explains that one drop in your drink makes dreams vivid and memories obedient. No one really believes him, but the jars sell out in minutes. There's something irresistible about the possibility. At the next tent, a woman in dark blue robes offers palm readings and love potions. The love potions smell suspiciously like cider mixed with thyme, but her confidence makes them feel potent. You sit for a reading. She traces the lines of your hand with fingers that tremble slightly. You've crossed more lives than you know, she says softly. Some of them still remember you. You blink, unsure whether she's teasing or prophetic. She smiles faintly, as though she knows you won't ask. Beyond her, a troop of children plays at being relic sellers, offering the saint's shoelace and the virgin's comb, all carved from wood scraps. Their mock seriousness earns them a few pennies, and you suspect they'll spend them on candied almonds before the hour's out. Not all of the stalls are so harmless. Toward the end of the lane stands a man whose table is covered with jars of murky liquid. Cures for curses, he proclaims, for fevers, for melancholy, for spirits that whisper in the dark. He lifts one jar, its contents faintly glowing in the torchlight. This, he says proudly, is distilled lightning. You don't ask how. Behind him, a skeptical blacksmith whispers, looks more like rainwater and candle wax. The crowd laughs, but a woman still buys it. Because at this fair, skepticism is just another form of hope. Everywhere you look, the sacred and the absurd mingle like wine and water. There's even a booth claiming to sell genuine hairs from the beard of King Henry himself. The vendor insists they were found in a monastery chest. Monks kept them for blessing kettles, he adds gravely. Royal flavor. One scholar centuries later will note that these fairs blurred the boundary between piety and parody, that the villagers likely knew they were being duped but played along anyway. It wasn't about truth. It was about belonging, about having a piece of the divine to carry home, even if it was fake. You linger near the relic stalls as the wind picks up, scattering candle smoke across the green. The mingled scents, wax, herbs, ale, and damp grass, feel timeless. You could almost be standing in the 1300s or the 1600s or now. The fair doesn't care which. Mistress Roan reappears, her apron now decorated with a medal she's clearly won from one of the relic vendors. They said it protects me from envy, she says. So far, only the chickens look jealous. You laugh, following her to a small fire where a group of travelers share their spoils, charms, bottles, trinkets, tokens. One holds up a strip of parchment scrawled with strange Latin. It's for luck, he says proudly, or indigestion, I forget which. A boy passes by selling candles shaped like angels. His sign reads, guaranteed to burn away bad dreams. Someone buys too. Someone else mutters, mine better come with a refund. The laughter that follows is easy and kind. For all its deception, the relic market feels oddly tender, an echo of humanity's oldest instinct, to believe in something when the world feels too large to explain. As you watch the vendors pack up, their relics glinting in the lantern light, you realize this part of the fair isn't about trickery at all. It's about comfort. Every charm, every fake saint's tooth, every potion is a small, glittering promise that life can still be bargained with, that maybe, just maybe, good fortune is something you can hold. The final vendor to leave carries a small wooden box of holy dust. He drops a pinch on the ground as he goes, murmuring, "A gift to the road." You catch the scent of myrrh and rain. The crowd thins, the lights dim, and Relic's Row becomes just another shadow on the sleeping green. But for the villagers who clutch their charms and bottles and blessed bones, the magic will last all year, or at least until the next fair. The dawn comes grudgingly like a miser handing over coins. You're still awake, half from the lingering warmth of cider, half from the distant hum of drums that never seem to stop. The fair has thinned to a hushed sprawl of canvas and ash. A few vendors doze under their stalls, their goods covered with rough cloths. The air smells of smoke, honey, and trampled grass. But even as the sun begins to peer over the thatched rooftops, the fair doesn't quite rest. Instead, it transforms. What was revelry at night becomes commerce by morning. This is the market's quiet face, the moment when merriment gives way to money. You wander through a maze of wagons being unpacked. The carters shout, the oxen snort, and the first true business of the day begins: trade. A woman in a crimson kerchief lays out bolts of wool dyed in madder and woad. A man beside her offers pewter cups, polished till they gleam like captured light. The smell of freshly baked bread cuts through everything else, and somewhere nearby, a baker hawks round loaves shaped like suns. You notice that buyers and sellers trade more than goods here. They trade news. The gossip moves like smoke between stalls. Who's married, who's widowed, which lord raised rents, which plague has passed 2 valleys over. In a time before printed newspapers, the fair is a living bulletin board, each whisper worth as much as a coin. Historians still argue whether these rural fairs were the birthplace of modern trade networks or merely seasonal carnivals. But as you watch a Flemish merchant argue prices with a local weaver, it's clear. This is more than a village pastime. It's a pulse point of the entire kingdom. Some traders have come from far away, France, Flanders, even Italy. They bring spices, linens, beads, and strange trinkets of glass. You pass a man selling what he swears is Venetian mirrorwork, though the back is clearly tin. Still, it glints enough to draw a crowd. At one stall, a leathery-skinned woman with eyes like coins sells time itself, or so she claims. Her table is covered in small hourglasses, each labeled with a different purpose: patience, sleep, love. She flips one and tells you, when the last grain falls, your wish will either come true or stop mattering. You almost buy one just to see which happens first. Nearby, a farmer sells his surplus apples by weight and wit. Take 3 for a penny, or 4 if you like me. A girl giggles and takes 4. The fair is full of this banter, the constant sparkle of humor against the drudgery of trade. It's as if every sale must come with a story, or it won't stick. One particularly loud group draws your attention, a ring of men around a table stacked with dice. They're playing hazard, the medieval ancestor of craps, calling out numbers and curses with equal fervor. The clatter of dice against wood is hypnotic. You can almost hear Fortune herself laughing as she tips the odds one way, then the other. A friar strolls by, shaking his head. Gambling breeds ruin, he warns no one in particular. But a moment later, he slips a coin to the baker and bets on which pigeon will peck at the crumbs first. You can't help but smile. Hypocrisy seems to have been as medieval as mud. Further down the line, craftsmen show off their tools: iron nails, wooden toys, copper pins, embroidery needles, and most impressively, tiny knives meant for trimming quills. You pick one up, its handle carved with a dragon. The craftsman, missing 2 teeth but full of charm, says, "Made from a broken sword, used to write peace treaties now." There's a poetic ring to that. Maybe not true, but you'd rather not ruin it by asking. Not far away, the sound of hammers echoes. You follow it to the smith's lane, where the air is hot with sparks and sweat. Blacksmiths, tanners, and coopers all work in a rhythm that feels older than language. The smell of scorched hide and burning coal fills your lungs. A young apprentice, his face streaked with soot, pauses long enough to grin at you. "My master says I'm shaping the future," he says proudly. "Mostly I'm just shaping horseshoes." "Every step matters," you reply, and he laughs, striking another spark into the morning air. Beyond the smiths, the livestock pens are a cacophony of bleats, moos, and clucks. Traders haggle over sheep as if discussing royal dowries. You watch one particularly intense argument over a cow that, according to its seller, gives milk thick enough to chew. You sincerely hope that's not true. The market is alive with contradictions. Sacred relics beside cheap trinkets, scholars beside drunkards, holy chants beside bawdy ballads. Yet somehow it all makes sense. The fair is a mirror of the age itself, devout and ridiculous, hungry and hopeful. By midday, the crowd swells again. The smell of roasted meat fills the air, mingling with the metallic tang of coin. The fairground hums with laughter and deals, the energy of commerce warming into celebration once more. Mistress Roan reappears, her apron now stuffed with apples and ribbons. "Traded half my pies for these," she says cheerfully, "and the other half for a smile." You ask if she's satisfied. She looks around, eyes glinting. In a place like this, satisfaction's overrated. It's the chase that keeps us coming back. Somewhere nearby, a young minstrel begins to play a new song, soft and wistful. The melody winds through the stalls like a thread of silk, tugging at memory and longing. People pause mid-trade to listen. Even the cattle seem to hush. The fair, for all its noise and movement, has moments like this. Brief, glowing stillnesses that remind you why people gathered here at all. Not just for goods or gossip, but for connection. For the feeling, however fleeting, that the world is wider than their own field or hearth. As the sun climbs higher, you catch sight of a painted banner fluttering above the stalls. It reads, "From feast to fair, let all hearts be open." It's a motto, a blessing, a promise. And as you breathe in the scent of baking bread and distant flowers, you realize that's exactly what the fair has done. Opened hearts, loosened laughter, and given everyone, from noble to beggar, a few hours of shared wonder. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the noise blur into something like music. When you open them again, you're part of the crowd once more. Another face in the moving tapestry of trade and dream, coin and candlelight. Afternoon settles over the fair like a slow exhale, the kind that carries the scent of baked earth and spilled cider. The frenzy of trade begins to soften. Laughter replaces bargaining. Songs replace shouting. The sun hangs low enough to gild every tent and banner with honeyed light, and the entire fair seems to glow. Now comes the part everyone's been waiting for, the grand entertainments, the spectacles that make the fair not just an event, but a legend. You drift toward the clearing at the far end of the green, where a wooden stage has been hastily built from planks and barrels. A banner flaps lazily overhead, "Theater and Wonders, 1 penny only." Children sit cross-legged at the front, adults lounging behind them, tankards in hand. A single fiddler tunes his strings, the notes sharp and playful. "Ah," Mistress Roan murmurs beside you, "the mummers have arrived." And just like that, the mystery play begins. The players are farmers, carpenters, maybe a miller or two, ordinary folk who, for one day, become angels, devils, and kings. They act out the tale of St. George and the Dragon, complete with a dragon that's clearly a patched green sail stuffed with straw. The crowd cheers when the beast rears up, and again when it falls dramatically into a heap. The mummer playing St. George bows low, his armor jingling. "Good people," he declares, "I have slain evil, though evil owes me half the rent." The audience roars with laughter. Even the priest can't help but smile, though he quickly makes the sign of the cross. Historians still argue whether medieval mystery plays were acts of devotion or thinly veiled mockery of the church's grandeur. But here, watching the crowd's faces lit with laughter and awe, you realize the truth is somewhere between the two. Reverence and ridicule were simply two sides of the same wooden coin. After the mummers come the jugglers and tumblers. One man balances on a wooden pole while juggling 3 knives. Each blade catches the sunlight, flashing like a quick smile. The crowd gasps when he drops one, and bursts into applause when he catches it behind his back. You swear he winks directly at you. "Close one," he mutters, "but don't worry, the blood's mostly for show." Next come the minstrels carrying lutes, drums, and bagpipes. They play a tune so bright it could peel clouds from the sky. The rhythm pulls at your feet, and before you realize it, you're swaying. Around you, couples begin to dance, boots thudding against packed earth, skirts spinning like petals. A man with a shock of red hair belts out a ballad about a lovesick monk and a lady who mistakes him for her gardener. The chorus is scandalous but hilarious, and even the children giggle at the parts they don't understand. You think to yourself, this is what passes for Netflix in the 14th century. Live, loud, and unpredictable. Somewhere nearby, a puppeteer sets up a small wooden stage. His characters are carved saints and sinners, each crudely painted. The story he tells, half moral lesson, half farce, ends with the devil tripping over his own tail. The crowd howls, delighted to see evil made foolish. But the most astonishing performer is a man who calls himself the philosopher of wind. He strides into the square with nothing but a bagpipe and a confident grin. "I can play the voice of the storm," he declares. "For a halfpenny I'll make it thunder. For a penny I'll make it weep." Someone tosses a coin, and sure enough, the first note he plays sounds like distant thunder rolling over hills. Then a soft, rising whistle that could almost be rain. You stand transfixed. It's not sorcery, just skill, but in this moment that's enough. Mistress Roan sighs happily. Every year they surprise us, same tricks, new wonder. And indeed, there's a rhythm to these fairs, a choreography of marvels that resets each season but never grows old. After the plays and songs, the energy turns mischievous. A circle forms around 2 young men preparing for a mock combat, wooden staves in hand. It's all bluster and theatrics, but the crowd treats it like a royal duel. When one lad fakes a dramatic death, a woman in the audience wails, "My boy, my only boy," and collapses in laughter. Someone starts a chant for an encore. They oblige, this time both pretending to die in slow motion, rolling through the dust as children throw flower petals at them. Between laughter and applause, the sound of bells rings from somewhere beyond the fair, vespers. The performers pause, hats in hand, as if to thank heaven for a day of good coin and no broken bones. The crowd disperses, but the fair's energy doesn't fade. It shifts again. Now comes the story hour, that twilight between day and night when words themselves become entertainment. A storyteller stands near the well, his cloak shimmering with hundreds of small, mismatched patches. "For a copper," he says, "I'll tell you the truth. For free, I'll tell you something better." You toss him a coin. He grins and begins a tale of a knight who dreamed of a fair so beautiful that it erased his sins. Each word falls like a spell, slow and deliberate. The crowd listens in utter stillness. Even the livestock seem quieter. You can feel the rhythm of his voice sync with the beating of your heart. The world narrows to the sound of his words, the smell of smoke and earth, the warmth of nearby bodies. When he ends softly with the line, "And so the night awoke, forgiven by the dream itself," no one moves. Then, as if waking, they sigh together. "Tomorrow," Mistress Roan murmurs, "we'll forget half of it, but tonight we'll live in it." As the sun finally dips behind the hills, torches bloom once more across the fairground. The performers pack away their props, their laughter echoing across the darkening field. You catch the faint shimmer of embers in the air, like tiny pieces of applause that refuse to fade. And in that lingering glow, you realize something simple but vast. The fair isn't just about food, trade, or spectacle. It's a mirror of life itself, a dance of faith and folly, beauty and fraud, hunger and joy. For all its chaos, the medieval fair holds a strange kind of order. Everyone belongs, even if only for a day. Night slides back in, velvet and deep, folding over the fair like a curtain drawing shut on a play that refuses to end. The torches flare again, lanterns are relit, and someone, no one knows who, strikes up a fiddle tune that coils through the air like smoke. The fair's final hours have arrived, and everyone knows it. That's what makes them sweeter. You drift back toward the green where the tables are being reset for the farewell feast, a rough, communal meal that feels both spontaneous and ancient. No invitations, no rules, no ranks. Just whoever's still standing and whoever can carry a dish. Mistress Roan is already there, sleeves rolled up, ladling stew into clay bowls. "It's what's left," she says proudly, "and somehow it's better than what we started with." You take a bowl and find she's right. It tastes of smoke, onions, and half a dozen spices traded from stalls now shuttered for the night. The bread is warm, the ale flat but forgiving, and laughter hums through the crowd like the low strum of a lute. Across the table, a farmer raises his cup. To good trade, good company, and good lies well told. The crowd cheers. Someone else adds, and to remembering none of them tomorrow. A ripple of laughter. The firelight paints everyone gold, traders, tinkers, children, friars, thieves. For this one night, the world's divisions blur. Everyone eats from the same fire, drinks from the same jug, listens to the same song. Historians still argue whether medieval fairs really fostered such mingling between social classes, but you can't watch this and doubt it. Here, the only hierarchy that matters is whose song gets the loudest applause. At one end of the clearing, a group of musicians begin a round dance. The tune starts simple, then loops faster and faster. You find yourself caught by the rhythm. Hands clasp hands, feet find the beat, and the entire crowd becomes one swirling circle of motion and laughter. A boy tumbles into the dance, too small to keep up, and the whole group adjusts their steps to pull him along. Someone sings a line, someone else echoes it, and soon the air is thick with joy so tangible you could almost cup it in your palms. Between songs, the fiddler shouts, "Requests." A woman yells back, "Play the one that makes the chickens lay." He grins and obliges, drawing out a tune so ridiculous that everyone cackles halfway through. You remember what a friar said earlier in the day. The devil hates laughter, for it drives him from the heart. Maybe that's why people laugh so much tonight, to keep the darkness at bay. When the last of the bread is gone, the talk turns to stories again. Only now they're stories of the fair itself. The year the puppet collapsed mid-sermon, the time a goose escaped and chased the mayor, the night a jug of cider vanished and somehow returned twice as full. Every tale grows taller in the telling. You realize that this is how the fair survives, year after year, not through ledgers or charters, but through memory, embroidered and retold. Mistress Roan settles beside you, her hands finally still. "When I was little," she says softly, "I thought the fair was a dream. I'd wake the next morning and think it had vanished like smoke. Took me years to realize it's supposed to feel that way." You ask her what she means. "It's the in-between," she says. "Not quite holy, not quite foolish. A place where the world tilts just enough for us to see what could be. Then it rights itself again." Her words sit with you as you watch sparks from the fire rise and vanish into the dark. For a moment the air feels thin, charged, almost supernatural. Maybe it's just exhaustion. Or maybe, as the villagers believe, the fairgrounds themselves are sacred for one night, standing on the threshold between the mundane and the miraculous. A drummer begins to beat a slow rhythm and the crowd falls quiet. The fiddler joins in, then a flute, then a chorus of hums that rise like prayer. The melody is neither solemn nor merry. It's something older, something that doesn't ask for words. Children fall asleep against their mothers' skirts. Men lean back on the grass, faces turned to the stars. The music fills every space between heartbeat and breath. You tilt your head and catch sight of the constellations above. The same ones that watched Roman markets, Viking ships, Saxon fields. Somehow they seem closer tonight, as if leaning down to listen. A voice nearby murmurs, "The stars trade light the way we trade stories." You don't turn to see who said it. You just nod, letting the thought settle. The embers crackle. The air cools. One by one, the musicians lower their instruments. The last note lingers, trembling, before fading into silence so deep it feels holy. Someone sighs. Someone else claps softly. Then, as if on cue, the crowd begins to disperse. You and Mistress Roan linger by the dying fire. "Tomorrow," she says, "they'll pack up before dawn. The green will be empty again, just grass and ghosts." "And you ask?" "I'll be back next year," she replies. "Same apron, fewer pies, more stories." You smile, knowing that she's right. The fair always returns. Maybe not in the same form, maybe not in the same place, but always where it's needed. As you stand to leave, a faint wind stirs through the emptying tents. It smells of wax and ash and distant rain. You could almost swear it's whispering something, thank you, or farewell, or see you next year. Either way, you whisper back. By the time dawn's pale edge creeps over the hills, the fair is already half gone. The fires have burned to dull orange coals, the tents sag like tired lungs, and the laughter that filled the air only hours ago lingers faintly, like perfume after a dance. You stand in the chill air, breath clouding, watching as the great unbuilding begins. This part is almost ritual, the slow undoing of wonder. Carters hitch their oxen to wagons, merchants wrap their unsold wares in linen and twine, and the once-crowded green begins to reveal itself again. Muddy, trampled, dotted with the occasional lost glove or coin. Mistress Roan stands by her stall, arms crossed, surveying the wreckage. "Every year I swear I'll pack lighter," she mutters, "and every year I bring half the kitchen." You help her stack the last few empty pie tins, still warm from the fire. The smell of crust and spice clings to the air. "Still," she adds, "it's worth the trouble. There's something about this morning after, like the world's exhaling." You nod. Around you, the morning after chorus rises. Wagon wheels creaking, roosters crowing from the village edge, the murmured farewells of traders who have become temporary friends. A dog noses through the ash pits, hopeful for scraps. Some of the traveling performers are still asleep under their carts, cloaked in their own banners. A minstrel stirs, rubbing his eyes. "Is it over already?" he mumbles. Then, grinning, "Good, I'm tired of smiling." You laugh, and he laughs too, and in that weary mirth there's something quietly beautiful. A small crowd gathers by the church steps where Father Allen blesses the fairground. He sprinkles water from a wooden bowl and murmurs Latin prayers over the muddy earth. "For safe travels and honest hearts," he says, though you suspect he's also blessing away any sins that were creatively committed in the night. A few villagers kneel, most simply nod and head off toward their wagons. One boy, barefoot, maybe 12, stays behind, collecting the melted drips of candle wax left on the grass. "For luck," he tells you. "If you burn them again, the fair comes back faster." You slip him a coin, and he grins, darting away into the thinning mist. Historians still argue whether the medieval fair's closing ceremonies were solemn or chaotic. Some accounts describe morning mass and penance, others drinking and dice until the last tent fell. But as you watch this blend of both prayers and hangovers alike, you realize the fair's true ending wasn't about either sin or salvation. It was about rhythm, life's inhale and exhale. Feast, then stillness. Mistress Roan wipes her hands on her apron and squints at the horizon. Funny, she says, how we build all this for 2 days, and it feels like it's been here forever. Maybe it always has, you say. She laughs. You sound like one of those monks who see angels in puddles. You shrug. Maybe I just see angels in pie crumbs. She snorts, amused. Flattery will get you a leftover. She hands you a small parcel, one last warm pastry, its crust golden and cracked. You bite into it and taste something more than spice, memory maybe, or gratitude disguised as sugar. As the morning brightens, the fairground transforms again, this time into a ghost of itself. Patches of flattened grass mark where stalls once stood. You trace the outline of a booth with your boot and picture its colors: blue cloth, copper bowls, a woman's laughter. The imagination fills the space more vividly than the eye. A group of farmers trudge past, carts groaning under barrels and baskets. See you next year, one calls. Or sooner if the harvest fails, another replies. That earns a few chuckles, though they're quiet ones. The fair is joy, yes, but it's also insurance. In hard years, it's the one reminder that community still exists, that even hunger can be shared, softened by company and song. You walk the emptying lanes, passing the relic sellers, the jugglers, the traders. Each has shrunk somehow, folded back into ordinary people. The relic seller who yesterday swore he held a saint's tooth now packs up his velvet cloth, muttering about blisters. The juggler hums tunelessly, tossing apples instead of knives. The palm reader yawns, her hands ink-stained from her own illusions. The fair's magic hasn't vanished, it's just gone quiet, like an instrument resting between notes. Mistress Roan waves you over for one last task, tying down the corners of her wagon tarp. The rope bites cold against your fingers. When you finish, she pats your shoulder. That's that, off to the next village. Will they have a fair too, you ask. She grins. They always do, maybe smaller, maybe stranger, but there's always a place where laughter rents the air for a while. She climbs onto her cart, gives the reins a snap, and the wheels start turning. You watch her vanish slowly down the muddy road, the morning mist swallowing her whole. The fairground is nearly empty now. A few children chase each other across the grass, their feet scattering scraps of straw. A single banner still flaps from a pole, faded letters spelling out joy and trade. It looks lonely without its colors. You pick up a fragment of it as you pass, a piece of ribbon, frayed at the end. It smells faintly of smoke and ale. You tuck it into your pocket, knowing you'll forget it's there until much later, until some rainy day when it falls from your coat and brings the memory rushing back. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings. The village resumes its ordinary rhythm: bread to bake, wool to card, fields to plow. But under all that, you can still feel the hum of the fair, the heartbeat that pulsed beneath it all. Because the fair doesn't truly end. It lingers in gestures and glances, in songs hummed absent-mindedly while stirring stew, in a charm hanging over a doorway. It lives in the spaces between work and rest, between duty and dream. You take one last look at the green, now bright and empty, and whisper, "Until next time." The wind stirs the grass as if to answer. By late afternoon, the last of the wagons have rolled out. Only the wheel ruts remain, like veins pressed into the earth. The air smells of damp hay and cooling embers. You walk through the silence, boots squelching in soft mud, and it feels like trespassing in a memory. The village seems smaller now, as if the fair had briefly inflated it, made it brighter, braver, louder. And now it has exhaled, deflated into its usual rhythm of chores and chatter. You pass the smithy, its door ajar, the clang of a hammer already resuming the daily pattern. Inside, the blacksmith hums a tune you recognize from last night's dancing. It sounds strange, slowed down to fit the pace of the anvil. Beyond him, in the lane leading to the fields, a group of children chase the last scraps of the fair: a feather, a cork, a tattered streamer. Their laughter echoes faintly, carried by the wind. You can almost see them years from now, grown and busy, recalling this same fair as though it had been a dream that everyone once shared. A few villagers gather by the well, gossiping over mugs of small ale. One woman says the fair this year was smaller, that the pie stall charged too much. Another swears she saw a jester vanish into thin air behind the ale tent. A third insists the relic seller was genuine. My cousin swears her cow gave more milk after touching that bone. They all laugh, though not unkindly. Historians still argue whether fairs like these were the beating hearts of medieval life or just brief distractions from hardship. But looking at the quiet faces, the lingering smiles, you realize it doesn't matter. The fair was the heartbeat, because it let people remember they were alive together, and more than their hunger or taxes or frost. At the edge of the green, an old woman in a shawl stoops to gather wildflowers. For next year's garland, she tells you softly. Her fingers tremble, but her smile is steady. You help her tie the small bundle with twine. It's the same ground, see, she adds, but the fair makes it different, softer somehow. You walk with her a little way, carrying her basket. She points to the horizon, where a faint trail of dust shows the direction the traders took. They'll be in the next parish by nightfall, she murmurs. And by next week, another fair will bloom somewhere else. Like a traveling summer, you say. She nods, pleased. Aye, and we catch a little warmth as it passes. You part ways by the stile, and she disappears into her cottage. The smell of wood smoke drifts through the dusk, mingled with roasting onions. The ordinary world has returned, but beneath it runs a quiet hum, the afterglow of laughter, song, and shared breath. You wander down toward the stream where the lanterns were lit last night. A few paper ones still float along the water, soggy and translucent. You crouch, scoop one up, and watch it dissolve between your fingers. The waxed paper splits, the painted stars blur, and for a heartbeat, you feel the entire fair fading like that lantern, into the current of time. And yet something stays. A tune hums at the back of your throat, the taste of honey on your tongue, the echo of applause when the puppet collapsed, the sound of Mistress Roan's laugh, the clink of coins, the sigh of a wheel, the rustle of silk. Memory becomes its own fair, one that never packs up. You stroll back toward the village, the first stars beginning to prick the sky. They look oddly familiar tonight, as though they, too, had danced above the fairground, drawn by the music. Somewhere a door creaks open, a lute string is plucked, and a soft voice sings a fragment of melody. You stop, listen, then smile. Because maybe that's the truest secret of the fair. It never really leaves. It just hides in the rhythm of ordinary life, waiting for you to hear it again. You reach your door, push it open, and step inside. The warmth of your small room feels like a benediction. You set down the piece of ribbon you kept from the fair. Its color faded to a gentle gold in the candlelight, and let it rest on the table. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere beyond the fields, you imagine another fair being built, lanterns lifted, pies cooling, voices calling across the dark. And maybe, if you listened hard enough, you could hear it from here. So now, as the night folds around you, the noise of the fair recedes like a tide, each sound drifting farther away until only a hush remains. You can almost feel the soft press of straw underfoot, the faint warmth of a dying fire, the gentle pulse of a drum that's no longer playing but still echoes somewhere deep inside your chest. Breathe in. The air tastes of wood smoke and apples. Breathe out. The stars above the old village sky blur into silver threads. History, for all its grand moments, often lives in these quiet endings, in the way a fairground empties, or a song fades, or a single ribbon carries a story long after the laughter is gone. You've walked through that rhythm tonight, from feast to fair to stillness, and somewhere along the way, you've touched the heartbeat of people who lived centuries before you. They danced, they sold, they sang, they loved, and then, like us, they rested. Let that thought settle with you. The world is always building and unbuilding its small wonders, every fair, every friendship, every fleeting summer. All of it becomes part of a larger music that keeps playing long after the lights go out. So close your eyes. Let the fair dissolve into the mist. The laughter, the music, the glow, they'll return when the season turns again. Until then, rest easy. Sweet dreams.